Hello and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we're looking at the Mother encounter in the Uldir raid instance from the BFA Beta.
So this fight is brilliant. It's a single phase encounter that takes place within chambers that over time will fill with fire and wipe your entire raid. The idea is that you leave each chamber before the fire spawns in. However, your entire raid can't go through at once, otherwise you're going to wipe the raid as well. Now before we get into the details about how the chambers work, let's talk about Mother herself.
So for the tanks you need to watch out for Sundering Scalpel. This places a narrow frontal cone on top of the tank, dealing moderate damage and applying a 50% damage taken increase debuff on that tank. Now this ability was avoidable while testing, and as a result, Mother could stay on a single tank permanently. However, on live you may need to swap if they decide to change how this ability works. For everyone to watch out for is the Purifying Flames. On a timer, the entire raid will have a single vent open underneath their feet, which basically creates a small patch of fire, which will explode shortly afterwards. Getting hit by one of them is dangerous, two of them will pretty much one-shot you. They're pretty easy to dodge as long as you just react quickly. Last to mention before we talk about the chambers is the winds. On a timer, winds will come from the left or the right-hand side of the chambers. After a few seconds, it will push you towards an open vent of fire. The idea is that you run against the winds and don't get pushed into the vents. There is, however, a lip between the chambers that has enough room for you and your tank to stand on that allows you just to completely stand still. The tank simply faces the boss away, and that prevents the raid having to move from the Sundering Scalpel. We're not sure if this is particularly intended, but us and others found this strategy to be easiest and best for DPS. The direction in which the winds will push you will alternate throughout the fight, so you've got to keep an eye on that. And also do note that the winds and the Purifying Flames can overlap, so you just got to be even quicker to react.
And that's all the boss's abilities that you need to deal with, all very simple and easy to deal with. However, as we already mentioned, you do need to eventually leave the chambers. So the chambers will slowly gain energy as soon as the boss has been moved into one. At 100% energy, that chamber will fill up with fire, and anyone within it will die very quickly. Now you enter a new chamber by passing through the defense grid, which is this large blue wall. When you pass through, you deal a burst of damage to the raid and place a debuff on the group that increases the damage the raid takes when people pass through for the next 6 seconds. This prevents you from sending large numbers of your raid through in a short space of time. For us, while we were testing, the highest amount of people we deemed safe to go through in a single go was 3. When a player goes through, they'll also spawn an ad within the new chamber 3 seconds later. These ads need to be tanked and interrupted. If a single clinging corruption cast is not interrupted, it will place a debuff on your raid that deals a stupid amount of damage. While this damage is active, you simply cannot go through the defense grid, otherwise you're just going to kill your entire raid. So it's important it's interrupted, otherwise you're going to slow everything down. To help interrupt these ads, you can stun them and you can use knockbacks. All DPS want to swap to these ads immediately and kill them off. However, there is one problem. The defense grid wall acts as a line of sight. This prevents players from casting on the ads unless the ad is within their chamber. It also prevents healers from directly healing people in another chamber. AoE effects, however, do work. As a result, you need to be extremely smart with who goes through the defense grid to the next chamber at what point. We settled with a tank and 2 strong AoE DPS with stuns to go through first. After the stack would drop, we would then send a healer and a DPS, and from that point onwards we would send 2 players at a time, alternating between 2 DPS and a healer and a DPS. And as for the best people to cross last would be your tank that has the boss, as well as a healer or 2. And the reason for this is, of course, every time the boss enters a new chamber, that's when that chamber starts to gain energy. So the later you do that, the better it is. Now this next chamber works exactly the same as the first. You just need to repeat exactly what you did previously. However, when you reach the final chamber, the boss will gain 100% damage taken increase, and it's at this point that you're just going to want to lust and nuke her down. In this last chamber, you're also going to need to deal with a new mechanic, which is the surgical beam. This Hallion style beam will drop from the ceiling and then begin to rotate, alternating its direction each time it spawns. Anyone caught out by this beam is flat out dead. This beam is pretty easy to dodge, however this beam will overlap with winds. If you've been keeping track of which direction the winds will be coming from, this definitely helps you dodge the beam, but it's still pretty difficult to do. But aside from the beam, that's all it is to this last area. You've just got to make sure you nuke the boss before you run out of energy in this last chamber. And to maximize that, you've just got to be as good as you possibly can within the first 2 chambers, just so you can get the boss as low as possible before she finally moved into the third. So feedback, what do we think?
So I do like this encounter. One thing that I think is very interesting about it is that it's going to change depending on your raid size. And what I mean by that is because you want to spend as much time in each room because you want to make use of the energy and therefore the time you have on the encounter before she enrages by setting everyone on fire, which didn't actually do any damage to us. I don't know why. But because that's going to be very dependent on your raid size, you're going to have to choose when you want to start sending people over. You never want to start sending people over immediately when you begin the fight because otherwise you're going to be done by the time the first room has 50 energy and you've kind of wasted that 50 energy. So you might as well have started, you know, when the boss is like on 40 or 45 energy and that would have been fine. But, you know, if you're in a 10-man group, you might be able to start at 80. You know, because you have less people to send across, or in a 30-man group, you might need to start getting going, you know, maybe very early on in the fight. So that's going to be interesting to find out. It maybe even scales with raid size. That's something that we don't actually know.
One thing to also probably point out is that this fight is going to be an absolute nightmare in Pugs.
Oh, it's going to be so fun.
It's going to be such a nightmare. Yeah. And it's only the second boss.
Yeah, it is.
It's only the second boss.
Because the thing is, you can pass back, and I don't think passing back spawns an ad, but it does set off the AoE damage. Yeah. So if you, for whatever reason, don't like everyone in your LFR group, just keep alternating between the two sides and blow everyone up. It's a good way of wiping quickly, at least. But yeah, fights like this are absolutely amazing. I love it when they use the environment in such a big way. You know, actually have them passing through each chamber. Most of the fights in World of Warcraft, it doesn't really matter where you're fighting the boss. It could be in a big, white, empty plane, like Xavius. A big white empty room and it wouldn't fucking matter. But this one, the room matters and it does feel good. And you can actually use the room, you know, with the winds and everything to try and counteract it, which I think is quite neat, even if it might be a little bit unintentional.
Yeah, I would say with the little lip strategy, I don't think that's probably intended. And if it is intended, they should probably change the Sundering Scalpel so it has the potential of hitting the raid. Make it so it's like an AoE around the boss or something, I don't know. Because it just seems silly that you can just totally ignore the winds and just stay on the same point for the entire fight and just get blown from one side to the other, one side to the other. Yeah.
No, I do know what you mean. The whole Sundering Scalpel mechanic itself seems a little bit strange because, well, the thing is you can't really tank swap in this fight. You need to send a tank across. So, like, you have to have a tanking ability that a single tank can deal with. But the Sundering Scalpel, even though it's so easy to deal with, it's so easy just to walk through, that the job for the tank gets quite boring. If you're just the, you know, the boss tank, it's like, oh, okay, now I've just got to walk out the way of this frontal cone. You know, maybe they could have spiced it up with, I don't know, something else.
You could force a tank swap. It just means that instead of the 2 DPS that would go through, the tanks would swap otherwise.
I guess you could, but that's going to be a lot more stacks. I imagine if that's going to be the case, you'll just have
the energy to do it.
You'll just have 2 tanks on one side. You'll just 3 tank the fight. Yeah, which I never think is what Blizzard want you to do. But in that case, instead of doing a complicated back and forth strat, yeah, you would just 3 tank the fight. But the only other thing that I'd say is that I like how the first chamber tells you the mechanics of the fight. Like, okay, there's goo under your feet, it's all horrible. And as you're passing through to the second chamber, you learn about the ad and how the wall works. But the thing is, in Chamber 2, there's no additional new mechanic that you particularly need to deal with. And then in the third one, there's Hallion Beam, which is fucking awesome. I love that fight. But yeah, there's suddenly a Hallion Beam. And that's cool. But it feels like one mechanic's missing from Chamber 2. It feels like they maybe could add a little bit of something there just to make it so it's a little bit different from Chamber 1.
I think even something small, like perhaps certain areas of the room light up on fire rather than just the vents on the far left and the far right with the winds. Maybe other areas also light up on fire.
Right, I know what you mean, yeah.
Something like that, just anything. Yeah. Just to spice it up that little bit more. Because it is a kind of a long encounter as well.
Yeah.
Having something in that second room, I think, would really fix it up. But aside from that, it's definitely our favourite boss so far that we've tested, although we haven't tested all of them. And it does have huge potential with good tuning and, again, perhaps another mechanic or 2. But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this preview, then please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And we want to give a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You guys are absolutely fantastic. If you wish to join this awesome group of people you see on screen now, then check that out. The link for it is in the description. And we shall see you all in the next preview.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.